Hello students, and welcome to chapter number 3. In this chapter we will be discussing interpersonal communication, which is a hugely demanded skill nowadays by all employers of all kinds. So you need to make sure that you develop your interpersonal communication skills where you will be able to communicate effectively with different people from different backgrounds and to conduct yourself in a professional manner as well. Let us try to understand deeply what we mean by interpersonal communication. So the word interpersonal, it comes from personal. So there is this personal component to it. So it has to do with relationships with others. So interpersonal communication is, basically communicating between people where you need to establish relationships, for example. So this is where you exchange information, exchange feelings, and also meaning by using both verbal and non-verbal messages. And we have seen before, when we say verbal, we mean words, whether they are spoken or written. But when we say non-verbal messages, this is any means of communication by which we do not use any words. So things like body language, voice tone, etc. So interpersonal communication also includes face-to-face communication. This is when you directly deal with others and you are basically in a meeting with them and speaking to them face-to-face, whether it's in physical location or even by using video conferencing and other types of technology. So interpersonal communication, it has to do with relationships, it has to do with other people. It's all about, exchanging messages, exchanging information, sending and receiving. This is what we mean by exchanging. So it's sending and receiving messages or information by using verbal or nonverbal communication. So here is our roadmap for this chapter. So for interpersonal communication skills, we will be talking about nonverbal cues of communication. We will be discussing listening, social media, voice and text, as well as meetings. So interpersonal communication in organizations takes so many different forms and has so many different channels. So these are some of the most common ways in organizational settings, and this is why we will be focusing on each and every one of them. Nonverbal communication includes a lot of things. There are so many components to nonverbal communication, so many cues, so many ways where you can communicate without using words. So things like body movement, or as we call it, body language. So how you position yourself, how you stand, how you move your hands, right? And then we have physical appearance. So this is why you have probably heard this before. This is why they always say dress for the job you want, not the job you have. So you always have to look professional whenever you are going to a professional meeting. So like how well dressed you are, whether you are wearing formal clothes or non-formal clothes, these all send messages about you and about yourself. People would probably take you more seriously if you are dressed professionally, and they will take you less seriously in a business context, for example, if you are not dressed in such a way. Then you have voice qualities. So, raising your voice or lowering your voice, all of those are ways through which you can also communicate, and each and every one of them says something different. They are appropriate in certain situations, they are appropriate with certain types of messages, and not necessarily appropriate in others. And time is also another component. So basically the time at which you communicate with others. So you always have to be very careful when it comes to selecting the appropriate time. So when we say time, we mean a lot of things. So during the day, for example, are you going to communicate with them at the beginning of the day or at the end of the work day? So in the morning or in the afternoon or in the evening. And then, also time could mean the duration for how long you are going to communicate. So this is why you always have to be very aware of the appropriate time. You shouldn't come to your supervisor, for example, when he or she is very busy with things. Always try to select the time that is appropriate and where you feel that they are in a good mood to be receiving messages, depending on their importance and urgency. Then You also have touch. So like things like handshaking, putting your hands on their shoulders, petting someone on the back. All those are types of communication, nonverbal communication, that also says something. You have to be aware of that, and you have to make sure that, are people comfortable being touched? So some people are not necessarily, welcoming of such type of nonverbal cues. So you have to assess and evaluate the situation and the person with whom you are communicating. And then finally, we have space and territory. So how close you stand to someone. We have seen before in intercultural communication how in certain cultures it is considered quite acceptable if you sit very close to someone and speak with them, while in other cultures they are more private and they would like you to sit a bit farther. So space and territory also says something different. When you are close with someone, when you have personal relationships with them, it is probably considered more acceptable if you stand and sit closely to them. But if you meet someone for the first time, it's not considered quite appropriate if you stand or sit very closely to them. So you have to be aware of your choices. Don't just do things arbitrarily. You have to be aware of how and where you communicate with people. Let us talk a little more about, the tone of voice or voice qualities. The way you project your message using your voice can totally change the meaning and can totally change how others receive it. So by saying exactly the same thing but in a different voice tone, the meaning can change altogether. So let us listen to the first example.
I can't believe you finished the project on time.
So in here, the speaker is actually very happy. He's excited. Wow, you finished the project on time. I cannot believe it. So you are a professional. Yes, good, good job. But, remember the words. I cannot believe you finished the project on time. Now let's listen to them in a different tone of voice and see how the meaning can change completely.
I can't believe you finished the project on time.
Now the speaker is actually unhappy. He wanted the project to be delayed, but then this guy came and was very professional and just finished everything on time. So now the speaker is displeased, he's not happy. So by saying exactly the same thing, using exactly the same words, but in a different voice tone, the meaning can change completely. So you have to be aware of how you use your voice whenever you are communicating with others. So we are still talking about nonverbal communication, and in this slide we will talk about the space and territory component. So basically how close or how far you sit and or stand next to someone. So the very closer zone is what is called the intimate zone. This is where only close people with close relationships should stand or sit next to you. And then we have the casual zone. This is probably like 4 feet away. And then we have the social zone, and the farthest is the public zone. So you need to assess the situation and the person. Try to understand what their preferences are when it comes to sitting and standing close or far away. So at the beginning, you have to be respectful of people. You don't sit or stand very close next to someone, especially if you're meeting them for the first time. Try to give them space. And as we mentioned, some people are more accepting of closeness than others. So it is always advised that you keep your distance. And if the person is inviting and is welcoming of more closeness, then you can do that. But you don't want to put yourself in an embarrassing situation where people would just push you away or tell you, please keep your distance. And you have to also be aware that, how close or far away you stand to, men and women is different depending again on the culture. So you must be aware of those. Are you very close to someone? How far away or how near you are going to sit or stand next to them? And now we will be discussing the listening component of interpersonal communication skills. This is a huge part of any communication process. They always say that a good key to speaking is good listening. So let's see, what do we have to say when it comes to listening. Here are some of the reasons why listening is a very important part of communication. How can you respond if you have not listened carefully and actively and attentively? So these are some examples of how listening can actually improve business. So when it comes to your tasks later on as a co-op student or as a future employee, you are going to be given certain tasks to complete. So listening has been proven to improve problem solving, because now you can, you have the full details of the situation. When you listen closely, when you listen actively, you have a complete understanding of the situation, and therefore your problem solving skills are going to improve. Also, product and service design, because you listened carefully to the concerns of the customers, you listened carefully to the requirements of the clients. Whether you are an engineer or a computer science student or a business student, you are going to sit with customers, with clients, with people that have certain types of requirements and different ideas in their heads. And you have to try your best to understand what they want so that you can deliver the product or the service as per their desire. So listening is your key to that. And then accuracy of communication. People often, become very fast when it comes to wanting to respond. So this is why you try your best to hold that, desire to respond quickly, and keep your comments to the end. Try to understand exactly what the speaker is saying. If you want or if you need, ask them clarifying questions, and only then respond. This is how you can improve the accuracy of communication. So now your messages are actually to the point and they are accurate. They have correct information. And then also understanding about new tasks. Whenever you are tasked with a new project, or let's say an assignment here in our course, without careful listening to the instructions given by your supervisor or by your teacher, you will not understand what exactly is, what you are required to do. So understanding new tasks is heavily dependent upon listening closely. And finally, frequency of sharing information. When you listen closely, this is going to improve this frequency of sharing information, because now, as we mentioned, you are probably going to ask clarifying questions, and instead of having to spend lots of periods of time without any messages going back and forth, by asking clarifying questions, by understanding exactly what is being said, you can give good comments and valuable ones. Now, moving on to the next part, which is relationships. How listening can actually improve relationships. It definitely improves interpersonal trust. So by listening closely to people, and when they see you as a good listener, when they perceive you as someone who actually listens carefully to what they have to say, they are going to be more trusting of you, and they are going to be more willing to share information with you. It also improves customer service and loyalty. Of course, how many times have you decided that you are going to go with that shop and not the other shop because in there the customer service is better? And when we say customer service, it means that they listen to you better. They listen to you carefully. They really understand what you're saying. When you see that, you made a comment to your car dealership, for example, when you took your car for service or maintenance, and then the next time you went there, they actually implemented one of your suggestions or comments, then this means that they listen to you, and therefore you are going to be more loyal to them. It also improves employee commitment and morale. Basically, when employees feel that their supervisors actually listen to what they have to say, when they voice out their concerns, and actually the supervisors and the managers and the decision makers actually do implement some of their suggestions and actually do address their concerns, this is definitely going to improve the loyalty or the commitment of employees, as well as their morale. Morale meaning how they feel, their spirit. They're going to be more encouraged and more motivated. And next we have timely feedback. So by listening actively and closely to people, this is definitely going to improve relationships in general, because it gives timely feedback. When we say feedback, we have seen what feedback means before. So this is the response or the reaction of the receivers of the message to the original sender. So timely means that it is on time. It is feedback, and it is exchanging of information that actually comes on time, where you can now utilize it to build upon it. And finally, perceptions of integrity. So you would perceive others who listen carefully, who listen attentively, as people who have integrity, people who are honest, people who are going to actually deliver on their promises. But when you say something to someone, and when you ask them to even repeat it, and they do not, and they are unable to do that, then how honest do you think they are? They will tell you, yes, we listen to you and we will implement all of your comments. Then just ask them a clarifying question. So what was my suggestion? If they're unable to even repeat what you just said, then there are huge question marks and concerns about how honest and how their integrity is being regarded. Now that we have seen that listening is a very important skill and a very important part of communication, so here are some tips and keys to better listening. How do you become a better listener? As we have mentioned, becoming a good listener is the key to becoming a good speaker also. So you begin with giving, first of all, the speaker your undivided attention. So remove all distractions and only focus on the person who is speaking with you. Okay? When the person speaking with you feels that you are interested in what they have to say, that when they see that you are putting forth some effort into really listening and trying to understand what they are trying to say, now they are going to be more trusting and more willing to share more information with you. You also have to stay open-minded. The problem with people typically is that they, as I mentioned in the previous slide, we want to respond quickly. So sometimes we interrupt others before they even finish what they want to say. So try your best not to make any judgments. Listen to what they have to say completely, and only then, try to, come up with a response. Okay? And then do not interrupt. They both go hand in hand. So try your best to keep your comments till the end. Even though the speaker might be saying something that you completely disagree with, but give them enough respect not to interrupt them, and listen to their point completely, because maybe they're going to say something towards the end where it changes your opinion altogether. So stay open-minded, keep your mind open, and then do not do not keep your response to the end. And then finally, involve yourself. When we say involve yourself, meaning show your interest and try to put yourself in their place, and try to make your best efforts to understand exactly the situation that the speaker is in. So involve yourself in the process. Sometimes people listen inactively, meaning this is why they say there's always a difference between hearing and listening. Listening is more active. This is when you actually give the speaker your undivided attention. This is when you're trying to analyze what is being said. This is when you're trying to make connections between the different points that the speaker is making. So this is how you involve yourself in the listening process. Here's now a practical example of how to respond to an upset employee. So an employee comes to you and says, so this is the sender of the message, that they have to miss the meeting tomorrow because he has a son who is in the hospital. So this is a person who is in distress. They come to you bearing bad news and they want your help to, miss the meeting or miss work tomorrow. So as a receiver of the message, how can you respond to that? So this is where you practice your listening and also practice your feedback. So the first way of responding to such bad news is by, first of all, repeating what they have just said. Okay, by basically you are repeating exactly what they have said so that you show them that I really understand what you just said. I have received your message and I understand exactly what you are going through. So let's listen to the example together.
You'll miss the meeting tomorrow because your son is in the hospital.
Okay, so now you are showing them that you understood what they have just said and that their message is important, and by repeating it, I show you that your message has been received. Okay, so that's the first way of responding, is by basically repeating. The second is by paraphrasing. You have finished English Composition 1 and 2, so you are definitely very familiar with what paraphrasing means. So you are saying or repeating what they just said, but in using different words. And this also says something different about you and about how respectful you are of the situation in which they are in. So by paraphrasing what they have just said, you show them that not only have I just received the message, but I understood it so well that I can say it differently. Let's listen to the example.
You can't come to tomorrow's meeting because your son is sick.
So you have shown them now, you have shown the people or the person who is just sending the message that you understand what they're going through, that you have received their message up to the point where I can even repeat it, not only repeat it, but say it in a different way. And then finally, reflection. So when you reflect on what they have just said, so reflection is about, bringing something more to the table. It's not only about repeating what they have just said, but this is when you build upon this point. Let's listen to the example.
I'm sorry your son is in the hospital. That must be difficult for you. Of course, I understand that you can't come to the meeting.
So when you are reflecting on what they have just said, you are trying to tell them that not only you understand the situation, not only you understand what they have just said and that their message has been received accurately and on time, you understand their feelings. So that's the reflection part. You understand their feelings. You understand what the consequences of such a situation is. So there are many different ways to respond to such a situation. These are only examples: repeating, paraphrasing, and reflection. Of course, there are so many other ways. This is, something that comes with practice. The key is basically being attentive, giving people your attention, and giving assurance to people, to the senders of the message, that their message has been understood loud and clear. And since social media is such a big part of our lives daily, of course there's going to be a separate part dedicated only to social media. So it's not only when it comes to our personal daily lives, but also in the lives of businesses as well. Almost all government agencies and even private sector ones all have social media presence, and they have to be they have to be engaging. They have to engage their customers and their clients and the public so that they build this image and they improve their reputation. So when it comes to social media, there are many things that we need to understand in a business context. So when it comes to social media, many companies are online. So they have Twitter accounts, they have Facebook accounts, YouTube, etc. So they use their accounts to promote their products and services. They use their accounts to engage with the public. You have probably seen how lots of government offices and companies are sending awareness messages about the coronavirus and so on. So why are they doing this? They're not promoting products or services. They want to be present online. They know that people are sitting at home and they are just viewing their Twitter accounts. So they want to ensure that we are engaging our market segment. So the people that we are targeting as customers or clients, we are reaching out to them by using social media. So this is a story of a company that made a huge mistake probably back in 2011. So in this particular year, 2011, there were uprisings and demonstrations all through Egypt. So this store, Kenneth Cole, what they did is the following. They said, there's uproar in Cairo, in Egypt, because we are, announcing discounts and because, our new collection has arrived. So they have offended so many people, millions of people in Egypt, by, by sending a message that these, demonstrations and these uprisings are not because of political reasons. They mean nothing. They are just about, sales and, buying new things. So people in Egypt were very offended and they took it very seriously. However, this particular store or company was actually very professional when it comes to dealing with it. So they apologized and they responded quickly, and finally they were able to recover. And you probably have seen so many examples from our local market. There are so many companies and so many restaurants and others that have said very stupid things on social media, and they were trying to be funny, or they were trying to reach out to customers or to the youth, and they ended up saying something completely stupid and offending to others, and they were very offensive to people. So, and people responded, harshly on social media by blocking them, by coming up with invitations to others not to buy things from them anymore. So a few words can end your business by saying something stupid on social media. So you have to be very careful of what you post. If you are going to use humor, if you want to be funny, make sure that you are not being offensive to others. So let's move on. When it comes to engaging customers online, we have so many examples from different companies around the world, and you can probably think of even more examples from our Saudi local market. We have basically two dimensions. It's engagement and presence. So when we say presence, we talk about how many social media websites they have accounts in. You have companies that have high presence on social media. So they have accounts on Twitter and Facebook and YouTube and Snapchat. And not only they just have accounts, but they post tweets and videos maybe on a daily basis. So they are always available online. But then you also have companies that have high engagement of customers. What we mean by saying high engagement is that they post, they don't only just put announcements and advertisements. They put something where customers interact with them. So they post things like a basic competition, like share your video of your favorite burger on this hashtag. So they engage, they keep their customers engaged and active, though. So they exchange messages with their customers. They respond to the comments and even to the funny comments posted by customers. So we basically have companies that have high presence or high engagement, or both. Or you have on the opposite side low presence or low engagement, or even low in both. So it depends on how they use, what their social media strategy is. It depends sometimes even on the type of the business, but it is always advised, even for entrepreneurs, for people who are going to start their own businesses, that you have to be present on social media. And you have not only just to be present, but you have to be engaging of your customers, because word travel, and customers are going to bring in more customers. So social media is a nice and inexpensive way to promote your products or services. But at the same time, it is very risky, because if you say the wrong thing, you can end up losing your entire business. So going back to the first example where Kenneth's stores handled the situation poorly when it comes to making fun or making light of a serious situation where, the demonstrations in Egypt took place. So here we will see the timeline of how they recovered very quickly. So based on that, we developed this lesson. We have 7 stages of committing a social media sin. A big mistake. A sin is a huge mistake. So we will view together how this store first of all made a serious mistake, and how they were about to lose a huge chunk of their customers, but they were able to recover very quickly because of their quick response. So at 10:15 a.m., this is where the store made that gaffe. So a gaffe is basically an unintentional comment that was supposed to mean something, but it was understood as something else. So it's basically a stupid comment that they made. So this is when they try to put 2 situations together in the same value. So they made the demonstrations in Egypt look like it's all about their discounts, and it's all about their online availability. So people took it very seriously, because they said, you are making fun of our demonstrations. This is a serious situation. The whole country is in jeopardy, but now you are making fun of us. So this is where people were very offended. And then, so only less than 2 hours later, this is when the response started to take place. So this is where people started making comments against this store. This is where people started, telling the store that they were very disrespectful, and this is where people started, having an outrage. Basically, they were very upset with the comment that the store made. And then the first thing that the store did was apologizing. This is how clever they were. This is how sincere they were. The first thing they did was apologizing. They said, we did not intend to make that comment. We did not intend to make light of a serious and sensitive situation. So this is how you start, making things right, by admitting that you were wrong, and by apologizing and saying that you are sorry. And then they started making fun of themselves. So parody is basically you are, being sarcastic. So this is where the store actually started making fun of their own comment. So by basically laughing at your own misery, this is how the expression goes. So they started making, similarities between their discounts and stores and other situations in different countries as well. And then now people started, viewing this as something that is fun. So humor is basically something that is fun, and something that you can laugh about. So now people started having, having a laugh about it, and they started becoming, less offended by it. And then towards the end of the day, this is where people just basically became indifferent. So they don't care anymore. They don't care anymore about the comment that they made. They don't care anymore about, how the situation basically manifested itself. So now people are just saying, well, I don't really understand why people were so offended. It was just, a stupid comment. It was just something that was not offending, not offensive to anyone. So, this is how the situation started to unfold. Basically, people were very upset. And now only, a few hours later, they were as if nothing has happened, and no one, not only that, but people are just having a laugh about it. So that's how the timeline goes, and this is how, the reaction on social media went from very light to a peak, and then, started to coming down again. And basically, the lesson now is that the situation is going to repeat itself, and this is how you deal with a situation like this. Remember that the first thing was apologizing, admitting that you were wrong, and saying that you are sorry, and then try to make the best out of a bad situation. So on social media, we talked about how can we engage our customers online. But let's talk a little more about how can we engage employees online. So there are so many different types of technologies that are available to us in our own organizations. One of them is the intranet. So you know that the difference between an intranet and the internet is that the internet is more about like the internal network within the organization itself. So only members of the organization can have access to that intranet. So the intranet, this internal network within your company, it gives you a great opportunity to engage and listen to employees, where you can listen to their concerns by email. You can solicit their input using your company's newsletter. So many different types of tools that you can, implement and that you can utilize by using this internal communications network within your organization. So how differently can employees use it? They can give feedback about products, about organizational change, about management. So it's basically a platform. You can use your intranet. You can use whatever tools online available to you as a platform, so employees can basically share their comments, their suggestions, their concerns, so that they feel that they are part of this community, part of this organizational community, where they can basically share their concerns, and they can voice out what they feel about the products and the services of the organization, and whether or not they have any suggestions as well. And now we move on to our next component of our chapter, and that is voice and text. It's a big deal of our communication throughout the day. We always use telephone calls. We use text messaging, either through SMS or through chatting or WhatsApp. So we always use these types of ways of communicating. So it only makes sense that we dedicate some part of our time to discuss how can we use them effectively. These are the different varieties of voice and text communications. Of course, now with the development of technology, we have so many more. So you are going to use your office phone or your smart or mobile phone to make voice calls. You are going to use your phones also to exchange messages, text messages, whether, as I mentioned, using SMS or using instant messaging like WhatsApp and others. You are going to use the internet to make phone calls as well. So this is the voice over IP technology. I'm sure that computer science students understand exactly what I'm saying. So instead of making a voice call using the regular traditional telephone line, you will use the internet to make that connection. It's like basically making a phone call using the WhatsApp. So there are so many different varieties of how we can use voice and text communications, and they are increasing in number day after day. So we have to be aware of the advantages and disadvantages of each and every one of them, and each and every one of them sends a different message about the urgency of the message, about the how formal it is. So you must be aware that making the decision of choosing which channel you communicate with is a decision that must not be taken lightly. Often you would call people and they are unavailable to respond to your phone call, so you would probably hear a message. So an outgoing voice message. So this is when you call someone and they are unavailable to take your call. So you would listen to a message that they left to anyone who calls them. Let's listen to an example.
Hello, you've reached John at 5-Star Lodging. I'm in the office today but away from my desk. I will get back to you as soon as I can. Thank you.
So it's friendly, it's to the point, it's very brief. So you need to keep it very short, and it needs to be also informative. So you tell them exactly what is happening and when are you going to get back to them. Now let's listen to the other side, where if you reach someone and you hear that message and now you have to leave them a message. Let's listen to an example.
Hi Malcolm, it's David returning your call. Yeah, sure, I'll bring a laptop and remote as a backup to the meeting with Sinclair tomorrow. I'll be at 505 Broadway at noon. See you then.
Once again, there are some commonalities between the two. They must be brief. You must try your best to be clear in terms of your pronunciation and so on. And it must also be informative. So you need to tell them the reason why you called them, and you need to tell them, if you are following up, and you need to tell them, what are you going to do next, or what are you expecting them to do for you. So it is, while it might seem, something that is, not really important, but in business situations, in professional contexts, when you are an employee in the future, or when you are a co-op student in the near future, you need to use these means of communication professionally and effectively. And now the last component of our chapter, and that is meetings. So in professional settings, you are going to be taking part in meetings probably on a regular basis, maybe on a daily basis. So you need to be aware of how you conduct yourself in these meetings. So there are certain tips that you need to follow. There are certain mistakes that you need to avoid. So this is what we will discuss next. A meeting is either formal or informal. So it can take place at organizations for formal purposes, or sometimes it can be even informal. So it's basically a gathering of people and an assembly of individuals. So these people come together. Why? The purpose is to discuss issues, to debate problems, and they want ultimately to make decisions. So they come together, they have a purpose, which is to talk about things, and ultimately they want to make decisions about those things. So in organizations, formal meetings take place all the time. They have a definite place, a definite time, and possibly a definite duration as well. So definite place meaning it has a specified location. So it's conference room B, or it's floor 2, room 102. So it has a specific time also. So it begins at this time and it ends at that time. So it from 1:30 to 2:30. So that takes us to a specific duration as well. So it's only going to last for 2 hours or for 30 minutes, depending on the purpose of the meeting. So formal meetings can, in organizations, it can discuss a lot of things. So this is the agenda. So a meeting agenda is basically what you are going to discuss. And typically we have, a couple of different options when it comes to meetings formally. We have organizational meeting. So these are things that discuss maybe something more of a big picture kind of thing. So we have something in organizations called the Assembly General Meeting, or the Annual General Meeting. So this is a meeting of the shareholders. So anyone who owns a share, anyone who owns stock in the company is going to be invited, and they are all going to discuss the future of the organization, and they are going to make big decisions about the the organization as a whole. And the board of directors are also going to be invited, where they are going to respond to the concerns of the shareholders. But then we also have operational meeting. So these are either regular or ad hoc. Ad hoc meaning temporary. So ad hoc meeting or regular meetings involving management and employees. So this is where managers and their employees, their team, meet to discuss everything, to discuss operations in the plant, operations in the HR department, to discuss operations in the information technology department. So it's about the day-to-day business of the company. So organizational meeting, this is a meeting that basically involves shareholders, the board of directors, and the big management. Operational meeting, it involves more of the lower level employees. So it's about the day-to-day business. So it's about moving our operations along, whether it's in the plant or in the administration, in the information technology part, and so on. We have so many forms of meetings. So meetings can happen face-to-face, they can happen over a conference call, a video conference, or using any of the online available tools. So again, each and every one of those forms has its own advantages and disadvantages. They are good for certain types of purposes and not necessarily very effective for others. So face-to-face meetings are in-person meetings for any number of people. So when you know that you have a message that you need to communicate across a big group of people, is it very easy to get them together at the same location? Imagine that you have 150 people. Can you find a location of 100 that accommodates 150 people? And imagine the logistical part of it. So you need to provide them with chairs, you need to provide them with pens and notebooks, and so you need to be aware that face-to-face meetings maybe are better to handle when the number of invitees, the number of people who are invited to the meeting is less. You also have conference calls. So these are audio conference calls for people in 2 or more locations. So when you have to discuss certain issues with someone who is not at the same location as you, who is at another city and at another country maybe, so instead of having to travel all the way there, and this is going to cost you money because you have to buy an airplane ticket and so on. So you can simply do that from your own location by basically arranging for a phone call. And you can, when it's a conference call, so you can invite as many people as you want. So 5, 6, 10, 15 people can talk together at the same time. So where you only listen to each other's voices. Again, they are probably good because they save money, but they're not necessarily very effective when you have a large number of people. Why? Because you don't see them and no one is going to know what is happening at the other end. And maybe people, if the meeting is not being run efficiently, then people are going to basically interrupt each other. There might be some technical difficulties where you are unable to hear the other side. So again, it has its own advantages and disadvantages. Online meetings are web-based meetings using any of the services like Skype, like WebEx. We have so many tools available now to us. Again, they are very cost saving because you don't have to travel to meet and discuss things with people. There are some technical requirements, of course. You need to have a very good internet connection. You need to have a good quiet room where there are no distractions. So again, it involves some preparation. And finally, video conferences. So this is where you use your smartphone, your desktop programs, or any special service to basically conduct a video conference. So again, this is where you patch in a lot of people from different locations, and you can basically discuss any of the topics that you want. Once again, it is cost saving because you don't have to travel. It can be very effective because you can share some material, if you want, instead of having to send the actual hard copies of the documents or of your agenda and so on, you can share an electronic version. So it is good for certain types of purposes. It's not necessarily very effective where you need to deliver some very hard news or where you need, discussion to take place for bigger part of the more urgent topics. So face-to-face, online, video conference, conference calls, each and every one of them has its own positive aspects and negative aspects. You need to be aware of what type of message you are trying to deliver and for how many people and how much time do you have to prepare for the meeting, and only based on that analysis you can now make your decision of which format you can use. Regardless of what format you are going to use for your meeting, you have to, prepare for that meeting. You have to plan this meeting. So the first thing you need to do is identify your purpose. So why are we meeting? What do we want to achieve? What is our objective, our goal? So the purpose of our meeting is you need to be able to make that statement. And then the second thing is that you need to determine whether a meeting is necessary even. Do we actually have to, take some time off of our days and be together at the same room in order to discuss these things? Or can I just send you an email or a text message and it'll achieve the same purpose? So you need to, consider, do I really need to meet with people to discuss these things? Or do I just want to inform them of something? Maybe an email could be better. And then you need to decide who should attend. So the list of attendees, the list of invitees. So you need to determine who is, concerned with the topic that we need to discuss, who has the authority to make decision, and, who are the people who are involved in this project or in this matter. And after that, you have to prepare an agenda. So an agenda is basically a list of topics. So you need to decide how are you going to run this meeting. So the first thing you need to do is, welcome your invitees, and then you need to discuss, maybe recap on a previous meeting, and then you need to talk about, agenda item A and then B, and then you need to conclude the meeting. So this is how you prepare your agenda. And then finally, you need to also arrange logistics. When we say arrange logistics, so you need to prepare the location. You need to ensure that you book or reserve the meeting room. You need to ensure that you provide, the pencils and the notebooks and the refreshments. And if you need to, if it is a conference or a video call, you need to ensure that you have a good computer. You need to download all the necessary software and ensure that your microphone is working and all of those things. So all those are, the logistics that you need to be very careful when it comes to preparing and arranging. Otherwise, the meeting is basically going to fail because of logistical problems. Now here's a nice sample of a meeting agenda. When you prepare for a meeting, this is what you need to, these are some of the elements that you have to include. So when is the meeting taking place and where? So the location and the time. You need to include the exact, hour, and you need to also specify the date and year. Then you have to specify the, the attendees or the invitees, the people with whom you have invited. So the participants who are invited, and who is leading this team, who is, chairing this meeting, and finally, who is taking the minutes of the meeting, the MOM. The minutes of the meeting is basically the, the summary of the discussion that has taken place. You also must include, the objective or the purpose of the meeting. So why are we gathering? And then you include your list of topics, your agenda. So you have to include, what are you going to discuss in this meeting? So the meeting agenda is actually very important because, as we mentioned, it's what you are going to discuss. How can you prepare for a meeting, without deciding on what topics you are going to debate? So you need to prepare the agenda, and you need to share it with the invitees before the meeting takes place. So if you send the invitation beforehand, and you must send the invitation beforehand, and you need to give your invitees enough time to to prepare, so you probably need to send that at least 3 days before the meeting. And you need to share with the list of people who are going to be invited and participating in this meeting, you need to share with them the list of agenda, your list of topics. Why is the agenda something that is very important? Because it accomplishes two things. It helps you prepare for the meeting, as we just mentioned, and it helps you run the meeting by keeping everyone focused on the schedule. So instead of going off topic, which meetings often, this definitely happens in meetings often. So people go off topic and they digress. So by having a clearly specified agenda, you keep everyone focused. You keep the discussions focused on your purpose. Knowing what topics will be discussed definitely helps participants plan for the meeting, and this is why we mentioned that you need to share the agenda with the participants, with the invitees, with the attendees of the meeting beforehand. So if they need to prepare, maybe they need to write or read something, maybe they need to revise a manual, maybe they need to go online and read more about a certain company, maybe they need to bring something with them, maybe they need to prepare questions. So by having this agenda, you keep everyone focused and you help everyone, including yourself, prepare for a meeting. It often happens that something goes wrong with meetings. So these are some situations that are proposed here, and you need to think about how can you handle each and every one of them. So let's just take one of them. So if a participant tells a funny story during the meeting and everyone just laughs, so now people are going off topic. They're not discussing the agenda anymore, and everyone is just having a big laugh about it. So how can you get everyone back to discussing the topic that you want? So you need to be, prepared for such situations. You don't want to be, disrespectful and say, please don't make any jokes. Let's keep focused. You don't want to come off as strict and rigid. So you need to think of a nice, respectful way of bringing everyone back to the discussion. So these are just questions for you to reflect on. Now, face-to-face meetings and virtual meetings, so like online meetings or conference calls where you are not at the same location as the other invitees, these are virtual meetings. They differ from in terms of how you need to prepare for them. So for any type of meeting, you must arrive on time and be prepared. And you shouldn't bring food because typically refreshments are going to be provided. To be respectful and to give the speaker your undivided attention, you need to turn off your phone so that you don't get busy with it. And then you need to introduce yourself to new people. If you are meeting some people for the first time, you need to inform them of your name and maybe your position in the organization. You need to avoid side conversations. It's very rude when someone is trying to say something in a meeting and they get distracted by your voice when you are speaking with someone else right next to you. You need to be, you need to participate fully. So you need to be active. You need to be, listening closely and being attentive to them. You shouldn't interrupt others, as we have seen in the keys to good listening. Do not interrupt others. Let them finish what they want to say, and then start, making your own observations and comments. Stick to relevant topics. Try not to digress. Try not to go off topic. You have a specified meeting agenda. Do not discuss other things unless the person who is running the meeting says, does anyone have anything else that they want to add or say other than the topics that we have already discussed? You need to stay focused and engaged. So this is why you turn off your phone. This is why you listen attentively and closely, because you need to be aware of what's going on. Imagine, after the meeting, your supervisor tells you what has been discussed, what was the topic of the meeting, and you are unable to answer because you were busy. You were busy daydreaming. You are going to put yourself in a very awkward situation. Then you have to show support for others' comments, if you agree with them, of course. And if you do not agree, you can disagree. Differences in opinions are not only good, but they are welcome and they are healthy. But you need to show that disagreement in a respectful way. For virtual meetings or online meetings, let's say, in order to prepare for them, you need to practice with the technology. So as I mentioned, you need to download the app or download the software, test your microphone, test your camera, test your phone, and see if everything is working properly. Avoid loud, plaid, or striped clothing. So because the camera can sometimes show these types of clothing and colors in a very odd way. So try your best to, again, dress professionally and try to avoid very, colorful types of attire. Log on a minute or two, log on a minute or two early, meaning just like you arrive for a face-to-face meeting on time, you need to log in to that meeting also on time, and it's always advised to be early. Not 30 minutes early, but 5 minutes early is considered polite. You need to minimize background noises. So if you have a device that is loud, you need to turn it off. You need to tell everyone in the room or everyone in your house that I am, on a conference call, or I am going to be on a Skype interview. So please keep quiet. Try to find a quiet room. Then mute your phone when you're not speaking. So when you are in a virtual meeting, whether you are using your laptop or your phone, if you are not the person who is speaking, press the mute button, because maybe you are going to move around a little, and this is going to be a little bit noisy and distracting to others. So when you mute your microphone, you avoid distracting others. Avoid multitasking. So instead of running different tabs and opening a YouTube video and doing something on Microsoft Word while following a conference call, you are not going to be attentive anymore. You are not actively listening to the person who is running the meeting. So multitasking is going to keep you from keeping track of what's going on. You need to allow a little extra time before you speak and state your name so that people know who is speaking, especially if it is a phone call where people cannot see you. And even if people can see you, if it's a video call, you need to state who you are so others know you, especially if you are, again, meeting them for the first time. So because sometimes internet connections differ in terms of their strength from one person to another, depending on their location, depending on the devices that they are using. So you need to be aware of that, and instead of speaking very quickly and right after someone ends, just give a little time before you begin your discussion. And finally, speak and act naturally. It is just a meeting. Just because it is online, just because it is done by using some sort of technology, it doesn't mean that you should change your voice to be like this. No, just speak in your natural voice and act naturally also. It's a regular meeting that is not taking place at the same location as the other attendees. So just speak naturally and act as usual. And the last part that we are discussing today is the minutes of the meeting. So after a formal meeting ends, actually during the meeting itself, someone is going to be assigned as the minutes taker. So this is a person who is going to write down what happened during the meeting. So it's an official record of the meeting, just like the sample we saw on the agenda. So who attended the meeting, when was the meeting conducted, what was discussed in the meeting, what decisions were made during the meeting, and who is responsible for following up after the meeting ends. All of those things are recorded and are written down in a minutes of meeting. So it's a formal kind of document, and it's a good skill to develop. And this is something that is that you can add to your CV, to your resume. One of the skills that you can write in your resume, once you practice it, of course, is that I am able to write official documents like reports and minutes of meetings. So the emphasis in this record, the emphasis in this official document should be on the decisions made, not necessarily on the, who said what. So because people are going to, the meeting is going to take place for maybe several hours. But then the minutes of meeting is not supposed to be, a letter by letter description of what happened and who said what. It should only emphasize what were the topics that were discussed and what decisions were made. And that's it. Okay, so it's not about who said what. It's not about what has been said by the members. It's about what the decisions were and what the main points of the discussions were all about. So to view samples of minutes of meetings, you can go online and basically just type in your search engine minutes of meetings, and you will have tons of samples and tons of examples of minutes of meetings. And there are so many sources online for free where you can download templates of minutes of meetings that you can use as a co-op student, or you can use as a future employee. If your supervisor in your future company says, we want you to attend this meeting and you are going to be the minute taker, so you don't want to tell them, I don't know how to take minutes of meeting. Just go online, type in minutes of meetings template, and you will have plenty of examples and sources available to you. Just download one of them and you basically fill in the blanks. So it's a good skill to develop, it's a good skill to acquire, and it's something that you need to be familiar with in a professional organization. Thank you so much. This was our chapter for today, and I'll see you on the next one.